Good morning, Manchester, and welcome to Hour 3 of Girard at Large. I am your host, Girard. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to bring this half hour to you commercial-free, courtesy of our friends at GoffstownToday.com. That's GoffstownToday.com. If you want to know what's happening in the towns of Goffstown, Ware, New Boston, or Dunbarton, hey, if you really want to know what's happening in Pinardville, you go to GoffstownToday.com. They are a friend and partner of our show. We appreciate their support, and if you're in that, if you want to know what's happening in those communities, GoffstownToday.com is where you go. We are going to bring it to you commercial-free because we're with Governor Buddy Roemer. He's been a guest on our show twice. We know that you folks have liked him because you've lit up our Facebook page, which, by the way, is Girard at Large, and our website, which is GirardAtLarge.com. Feel free to submit your questions, but the governor made an interesting statement before we went on the air. He said, "I'd like to get some people calling this morning. I want to talk to the folks." So that's an invitation for you to call 647-1250. That's 647-1250, where you can ask your question of presidential candidate Buddy Roemer. Governor Roemer, thank you for joining us this morning here on Girard at Large.
Good to be here, Rich. This is multiple crimes I've had with you. So, I've got to keep myself under control this morning. I promise.
That's a repeat offender. No, we don't. Hey, listen, we get some very interesting feedback from our listeners last time. We thought you did a great job sort of laying out the case, what the issues were and what needs to be done here in the United States of America.
Right. And as I said then, Rich, I'm concerned both short and long term about our country. I think we're in serious difficulty.
And you did a pretty convincing job last time of laying out, making your case, I guess. So I think what we need to do is jump into some of what you see are the solutions, and I want to focus on a couple areas, well, three really, at least initially. And again, we're taking your calls at 647-1250. At the request of Governor Roemer, you don't often have a guy say, "Gee, I hope people will ask me questions." I think I just read a news article about another candidate who held a town hall in Bedford here yesterday, made a 15-minute speech and left, no questions asked.
Wow.
That was Governor Romney, and that was in today's newspaper. So, Governor, let's tackle the issue of health care first.
All right.
It's first and foremost on a lot of people's minds. We've got this Obamacare monstrosity that's hanging out there.
Right.
First of all, I assume that you would be in favor of repealing Obamacare.
I would. I like some provisions. I'm a diabetic. I've been a diabetic for more than 40 years. I wear an insulin pump. I think the quality of our health care in America is the best on earth. I think the costs are unnecessarily high. Let me say it again. I think the costs are unnecessarily high. And I would approach a systemic lowering of costs. Here's how I would do it. Obamacare goes that the government is the solution. I disagree. I think the government is the problem. His plan was bureaucratic, raised health care costs, was a sop to insurance companies, which didn't have to compete, was a handoff to pharmaceutical companies, which didn't have to compete, was a salute to tort lawyers. There was no tort reform. And finally, there were no incentives to health care providers to save documented costs while maintaining quality. My approach would be just the opposite. I wouldn't start with lawyers, hospitals, insurance companies, or pharmaceuticals. I would start with doctors, patients, and nurses. We'll start from a different place. Number two, we will require insurance companies to compete. They are protected now. They are deliberately under Obamacare, not under the Sherman Antitrust Act. They're the only industry in America, besides organized baseball, not under the Sherman Antitrust Act. As a result, there are 50 monopolies in America. Each state has its own monopoly. And if you don't believe me, here's a test for you. See if you can buy medical insurance across the state line. You can't. Therefore, your selection is limited, your choices is limited, and what happens when that happens? Price goes up. Number three, I would require pharmaceutical companies to give price discounts for large segments of the population who use their drugs. For example, seniors. I'm 68 years old, I'm a senior. The biggest cost of my health care is pharmaceutical costs, insulin and other related medicine. You know, we're the only nation in the industrial world that does not allow pharmaceuticals to give price discounts or to allow fair competition from Canada, both of which would lower costs for health care. Number three, I would have tort reform. The biggest, one of the biggest, I don't want to exaggerate, about 8% of the cost of health care is legal cost. One of the biggest drivers of that are frivolous lawsuits. Once again, at the federal level, we've avoided every opportunity we've had to penalize those who have frivolous lawsuits by making the loser pay for the cost. Finally, I would allow all medical providers to document their costs over the course of a year. And if they can show a 10% increase in lowering costs over the course of that year, if they can document, I would let them keep 25% of everything they save. Now, we need to do more, but you won't do anything until you put doctors, nurses, and patients in the room to start with, and you make those 4 changes in the system. I predict that we can lower healthcare costs by as much as 20% in the next 3 years. You know what the projection is under Obama's plan? Up 26% in 3 years. I think we can lower the cost by 20% in those 3 years, and the difference is 46% savings in your medical cost.
Girard, our time is 8:15. We are interviewing Governor Buddy Roemer, former governor and congressman from Louisiana, about his presidential bid in the Grand Old Party. Taking your calls at 647-1250, that's 647-1250. If you have any questions for the governor, he's eager to answer them. So, Governor, you mentioned...
Unless you're a lawyer, an insurance executive. Oh, excuse me, I'm kidding.
No, hey, I want those calls. It's going to be good radio.
Yeah, come on.
Well, you know, I agree with you about the insurance companies being able to sell across state lines and improve competition.
Simple.
But, you know, one of the things that we never take a look at, it seems to me in this discussion, is the repeal of federal mandates that are imposed on the health insurance companies. Everything from pre-existing condition coverage to a whole variety of different things. And the states have been there have been some pretty notable instances here where the state of New Hampshire has forced employers to discontinue their health insurance.
Well, you know why this happens, Rich? Once you get in the trick bag of structuring competition rather than encouraging competition, then you can't stop. Well, the government has to unconstitutionally mandate everything. Well, because they set up this bogus system where an insurance company can't sell medical insurance across the state line. By the way, you know why that happened? No money. They're the largest contributor to congressmen and presidents and senators. It's called money. When I got elected to Congress in 1981, I went to Congress. I'm a baby freshman. I'm 36 years old, ready to change the world. One of the first calls I got on my first day, by the way, I ran for Congress taking no PAC money. I wouldn't allow any contributions outside my congressional district. I was the only member of Congress to do that. Only member of Congress to do that. One of the first calls I got, my first day, I never will forget it. After as a Democrat, I voted against Tip O'Neill for Speaker. So I went back to my office very proud of myself, and the phone was ringing. It was the Speaker, Tip O'Neill, calling. What the hell are you doing, Roemer? Anyway, the second call I got was from an insurance executive. So he said, I didn't meet him. He said, I'm so-and-so, I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, or St. Louis, Missouri. I represent the Insurance Association, and we have a check for you. And I said, for what? He said, well, as a great member of Congress, we want to support you. I said, well, is this a PAC? He said, yes, it's a $5,000 check, and we'd like to come by your office and give you the money. I said, keep it. I don't take PAC money. I guarantee you, if you talk to your 2 congressmen from New Hampshire, one of the first phone calls they got was with a big check from insurance companies. That's how this system gets polluted, Rich. It's not for the patients. It's not for the sick. It's not for the taxpayer. It's for the special interest. And they buy Congress. You're going to ask me at some point in the show, what's the solution, buddy? How do you deal with immigration? How do you deal with health care? How do you deal with a budget that hadn't been in balance in a lifetime? How do you deal with tax reform? Let me give you a real straightforward answer. You get the money out of the room and put the people first. All things follow the people.
What would your well, before I get on to that, I want to ask you about what your campaign finance reforms would look like, but I have a listener question here from Joe in Manchester. It says, Roemer equates insurance to a cell phone. The more you make, the cheaper it is. Wrong. Insurance is a risk. Also, insurance companies differ by their billing methods and what they cover. That increases the billing complexity for providers and increases costs. Your comments?
You know, these are good arguments, but they miss the point entirely. If I have the only insurance company in the world, I can charge whatever I want. They can be accountants, they can be this and that. Baloney. What we need is more competition. What we need, do you think that insurance prices are just related to the risk involved? No, sir. They're related to what the insurance companies can get away with. Here's what I want. I like insurance. I like the availability of it. I just want choice and competition. And I'll give you a guarantee. Prices will fall.
Well, choice and competition will do that, but don't we also have to deal with the issue of the mandates placed on insurance companies and what they have to provide by the state?
We do, but once again, Rich, you have to get out of the government-run insurance business. And when the government says, okay, guys, we're going to allow you to have a monopoly in each state. We're not going to put you under the Sherman Antitrust Act. You get what you want. But in return, we get the right to tell you who you can insure and who you can't insure. So, how do you change that? You put the insurance companies under the choice and competition of the Sherman Antitrust Act, and you get the government out of the business. That's how you get rid of the mandates. You'll never change the mandates, Rich, never, until you get the government out of the business and their money out of the pockets of congressmen.
Well, let's get into the campaign finance reform. It seems to be a pretty good jump from here. What would campaign finance reform? What would campaign financing look like under President Reagan?
7 things. 1, full disclosure. Most of the money spent in politics today is not disclosed. You don't know where Mitt Romney gets his super PAC money from. You don't know where John Huntsman gets his super PAC money from.
Well, it's his father, according
Well,
to
in that case, we can guess, but, we don't know for sure.
No,
Be fair to John, we don't know for sure. The law allows super PACs to give unlimited amounts of money. They treat corporations like they're people, and we'll never find out about it. My first rule that I'll ask Congress to adopt is full disclosure. Conservatives like me think sunlight is the best cure. Full disclosure. Now, liberals want limits. I've had this debate for 40 years, since I first went to Congress. Actually, 31 years ago. But even before I went to Congress, I talked about this problem. We need to make sure that we let sunlight in the system. Number 2, I would have PAC contributions equal individual contributions. In other words, under the current law, individuals can give $2,500, PACs can give $5,000. I would bring PACs down to $2,500. It's fair, it's broad.
Let me ask you a question about that, Governor.
All right.
Because if conservatives don't like limits and liberals do, then why wouldn't we have a system where any corporation, any PAC, any individual could give as much money as they wanted to any candidate or any party or any PAC, as long as there was full disclosure of the donation?
And that's a system that I like. The only problem with that system, in an age where the special interests and the big corporations are so dominant in our economy that they could actually buy an election. And the reporting requirements are so lax. For example, I would change reporting to 48-hour disclosure. Under current law, it's 120 days. So a big corporation, a special interest, say you see where the Chinese hacked the Chamber of Commerce computer yesterday, was announced today. I mean, a great threat to our country. A Chinese corporation, under your provision, could give a president $1 billion, and they would own the president. The reason you have some limits with full disclosure is to keep within bounds a speed limit. You've got one on 293. It's 65 miles an hour. Some libertarians say no speed limit at all. Deaths go up, accidents go up, broad limits. And that's the way I would approach disclosure, full disclosure, and limits. Broad limits. $2,000, $2,500, open to everybody, but no corporation could come in the dead of night and give $1 million or $10 million. And that's a debate we've been having for some time. Here's what we have now, Rich. We have no limits and no disclosure. You now live in a country where everything is wide open, and you'll never know about it until you read my book sometime next year as I go to the White House to tell you how this campaign came down.
All right, Governor, I want to get back to this, though. If a Chinese bank gave a candidate for president $1 billion and there was instant disclosure, by the way, I think...
If there were instant disclosure...
No, we're talking about what it would look like if you were president.
Okay.
Now, doesn't that system become self-limiting? I mean, doesn't someone say, hey, listen, I don't want to look like you own me, so I'm not going to take your $1 billion. I'm not going to take $1 from you because you're a Chinese bank. Or, you know, let them... If Bill Gates wanted to give me, $100,000 to run for Congress, then I have to decide whether or not I want people to think I'm in Bill Gates' pocket because there's this $100,000 disclosed as a contribution. Doesn't the system at that point become self-limiting? Whereas Bill Gates...
It does.
Bill Gates...
With one exception.
Yeah, go ahead.
The threat of money. Obama, healthcare reform, he made a call to the pharmaceutical company lobbyists. This is fact. And he said, if you don't go against my bill, I will protect you in the bill from competition. And the deal was made at the White House. I talked to the man who made the deal. And I said, Billy, what decided it? He said, the threat of money. He did not want us out there spending money against his bill because he knew we could whip it. Now, if you have full disclosure, it's powerful. If you have broad limits with full disclosure, you keep from the abuse of one man making a difference in a bad bill.
All right, Governor, we're going to pick up the conversation about what you would do with campaign finance reform right after we check traffic, weather, and go to the news. David, how are the roadways? And we're going to bring this segment to you for commercial-free this morning, speaking of Goffstown, courtesy of our friend Bill Wynne at GoffstownToday.com. So if you want to know what's going on in the towns of Goffstown, New Boston, Dunbarton, and Ware, we'll even throw Penardville in, because that actually cuts across into the city of Manchester too. You can go to GoffstownToday.com, because if they know about it, you should too. All right, so continuing with Governor Buddy Roemer, taking your calls at 647-1250. The staff around me here keeps flashing me signs. Say the phone number, say the phone number. Governor Roemer wants your calls, 647-1250. We're talking campaign finance, and Governor, you've gotten 2 of the 7 points that you wanted to make about what you would do with campaign finance if you were in the position to do it.
Full disclosure, I think you and I agree, that's a good first step. Yep, we don't have that now. Number 2, I dislike PACs, and the reason I do is that you don't know who the individuals are who give, so they don't have full disclosure under the law. What I would do would be to equalize individual gifts and PAC gifts, and then I would not bother with PACs. Right now the law is $2,500 for individuals, $5,000 for PACs. Why is there that difference? Make them both $5,000 or both $2,500, but let's have equality there. Number 3, I would have 48-hour reporting. Current law is 120 days. Heck, the election can be over by the time you find out who's funding the mayor, who's funding the president, where does he get his money? We need to know these things. It gives us a little security, and knowledge is a powerful thing. So I would have 48-hour reporting. In the age of the internet, we can do that. Number 4, I would not allow lobbyists who are registered in Washington. And to be a lobbyist, you have to register under the rules of the Congress. I have no problem with that. But I would not allow a registered lobbyist to bring a check to a politician or to participate in a fundraiser. Now, they're free. You can be a lobbyist or you can be a fundraiser. You can't be both. It's a positive step that we in Louisiana did years ago. It helped clean up our government. We were run by big oil and big chemical, and they were buying the legislature. We changed that. An additional change, I would not allow super PACs to exist. Let me tell your audience what a super PAC is. Under current law, a super PAC is an organization that is independent of a candidate, but they organize to influence an election. They can take their money from people or associations or corporations. Corporations are treated like people under super PACs. Do you know that you can't disclose where the super PAC gets its money? Do you know that the super PAC is not limited on how much money it can spend in a campaign or how much money it can take from a corporation or a person for that matter? Did you know that the only rule is that the super PAC must be independent of the candidate? Well, I'm asking you, is John Huntsman's father independent from John Huntsman? I mean, I know I was born. I just wasn't born yesterday. Do you know that Mitt Romney's super PACs are run by his former business partner, his former campaign manager, his former chief of staff? That's independent. Do you know Rick Perry has 7 super PACs? Newt Gingrich has 1. Ron Paul has 1. Michelle Bach, I know I'm giving them free airtime, but hell, it's a problem. They're illegal. Under the law, they must be independent. How do you police that? I don't think you can. They should be done away with. And finally, I would have criminal penalties for politicians who violate the law. Now let me say it again. I would have criminal penalties. Congress lives in Disneyland. It's a circus run by the clowns. They drive limousines. They never get challenged. They get reelected 96 times out of 100. There's no disclosure on inside dealing. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday which listed 8 congressmen and women who used insider information to make fortunes in trading stock, what the average person doesn't have. Here's my position on campaign reform. You do these 6 or 7 steps, and that's the beginning of a balanced budget. That's the beginning of tax reform. That's the beginning of comprehensive immigration reform. That's the beginning of fair trade with China. That's the beginning of jobs in America. It's real simple. The big boys own Congress, and they don't want new jobs. They want more profit.
Girard at Large time is 8:42. We are with Governor Buddy Roemer from Louisiana, former Governor Buddy Roemer. He is a Republican candidate for president, and you probably haven't heard much about Governor Roemer, and we're happy to help you learn. So, Governor, given what you just said, we've tackled health care, we've tackled campaign finance reform. Now on to the issue of jobs in the economy,
Yep.
which I will tie in the federal budget. It always amuses me when people argue that, oh, we can't cut government spending now, the economy is just starting to recover. Well, if the economy is a function of government spending, why aren't we just
Spending more.
Yeah, spending more. Where are you on the... all right, nobody wants higher taxes, nobody wants greater complexity, nobody wants more spending. We'll concede those points. So, Governor, you're elected president. What do you do?
I start with campaign reform. I go immediately then into tax reform and budget reform. You are right on target. These are critical steps to give certainty to the business investment in our economy. We need growth. We're not going to balance the budget without growth. Growth needs certainty. We need to stop these temporary tax fixes. I like a flat tax, as you know, Rich. I said it last time I was here. The reason I like it is that the lobbyists can't fool with it. It's 17%. The first 50,000 is income tax free for a family of 3. Income tax free. They still pay sales taxes where appropriate. They still pay property taxes. They pay plenty of taxes. They just don't pay federal income tax because they take care of their small family. Everything above that is at 17%. No double tax. No alternative minimum tax. No marriage penalty. Simple, clear, progressive. Here's the way it works. You make $100,000 in your family, you would pay 8.5%. You make $200,000 in your family, you would pay 10.5%. You make $500,000 in your family, you pay 14.5%.
And that's
the 17% with the deduction. That's the
make
way
that
it works, right?
Yep.
I'm trying not to confuse it. What you end up with is a very simple tax form, applicable to everybody. There are no exceptions, no deductions. A major corporation can't say, well, we're deducting our building cost in China, therefore we don't owe any American income tax. Baloney. GE would have to pay on income made in America. It's a territorial approach, very simple, very progressive, very fair, and would lower the rates marginally for most people. But it does 2 things that are not at first apparent. I would have a 2/3 vote requirement to raise taxes in Congress. Let me say it again, a 2/3 vote. I'm 68. I helped rewrite the Constitution of Louisiana almost 40 years ago, 1973. I put a provision in there that has worked very well for my state. I was chairman of the Revenue and Tax Committee. I put a provision that you could not raise taxes in Louisiana without a 2/3 vote of the legislature. And that stops a whole lot of baloney. So if you have a flat tax, a low marginal rate, no exemptions, no deduction. Now let me give you the bad news. That's no deduction for home interest. Okay? There's no mortgage deduction. There's no loophole for GE. There's no foreign tax credit. We cleaned it up. You'll end up paying fewer taxes, but you'll know 2 things. 1, the lobbyists can't change it. It's a 2/3 vote. They can't get it. And number 2, everybody pays their fair share. Nobody, Buddy Roemer, a rich person, a new person, a big person, a corporate person, everybody pays a little, and we're all better off. That's called tax reform. You do campaign reform first, get the lobbyist out of the room, and then you go get a good tax form. The 3rd step, and I'll shut up for a minute, the 3rd step is budget reform. Our budget has a $1.35 trillion annual deficit. I've looked at the budget. I've actually read the budget before I ran for office a few months back. Obama's budget is a deficit no less than $500 billion a year for the next 10 years. This country's in trouble, Rich, and we need a systematic, multi-year approach. So I wouldn't do it 1 year at a time. I'm a multi-year guy. I'm a banker by training. I want to see a business plan for the business of our government. It's too large. At 26.1%, it ought to be 18%. I would reduce spending, and that's the key. Not taxes, spending. Spending's the problem. I would reduce spending by 1% of GDP, that's gross domestic product, a year for 5 years. That would be a certainty. I will outline all 5 years of the cuts when I'm president in my State of the Union. I like budgets. I think that keeps discipline on our government and keeps it from grabbing power and getting too big. I would start with subsidies. There's a housing subsidy, there's a small business subsidy, there's a corporate subsidy, there's an ethanol subsidy, there's an oil subsidy, there's an unproven energy technology subsidy. I would start with the subsidies, and then number two, I would restructure government. I would eliminate the Department of Energy. I love these guys running for president. I basically, if you ask all 8 of them, how much money does the Department of Energy spend? I bet they can't get within $5 billion. I'll tell you what the number is, $27.1 billion. The Department of Education spent $79 billion this year. 5 years ago, they spent $11 billion. Has education improved? Of course not. So you need to restructure our government. We can do it. For example, I'll give you some examples. 42% of all federal employees will retire in the next 10 years. Don't replace them. Use technology. Make government like FedEx more efficient than the post office. Use your brain. Manage the government. I would replace only half of the retiring workers. You know what that saves? That saves $186 billion every 3 years. Number two, I would consolidate information technology. We have 315 information technology centers in government. We only need 1. Number three, I would standardize software. We use 37 different kinds of software. Heck, the CIA can't talk to the FBI. We don't have a government. We have a bureaucracy. It's too big, too fat, too slow, and too inefficient. We're going to balance the budget over 5 years. Do it right. Not hurt seniors, not hurt young children, but help America.
Gerard at Large time is 8:50. You're listening to Governor Buddy Roemer, Republican candidate, former governor of Louisiana, Republican candidate for president. By the way, we got a Joe in Manchester who sent that healthcare thing, sent back another note saying Roemer is right. The government mandate for emergency rooms to treat all who show up gives providers a blank check on setting the cost of that treatment.
Need competition, guys. I didn't invent this. I didn't invent this thought that if you're the only radio station, you can say what you want and charge what you want. If there are 3 of them, you better be right.
That's right. So, Governor, on the idea of entitlement reform,
yes,
because so much of the money that we spend now is mandated,
hardwired. Yeah,
hardwired. I mean,
yes.
You could eliminate the entire discretionary part of the federal budget, even the changes you were just talking about, which would save a whole lot of money.
Yeah,
pale by comparison.
No.
So, where are you coming at the whole entitlement?
Let me be specific. They're on the table now, guys. I know this is not politically popular to say, but it's what I believe, and you need to know what I believe. I believe that everything ought to be on the table. I believe that we are one nation. I believe that we'll do better when we're fighting a war together, and our war here is against unneeded, unnecessary, uncontrolled, undisciplined federal spending. Entitlements are on the table. That the 2 major entitlements, I don't really think they're entitlements, but they are hardwired, is Social Security and Medicare. I say I don't think they're entitlements because we pay for those. We actually pay taxes for those. Those are not a gift. That's a return on our money. I would raise the retirement age slowly. Here's how I would do it. 1 month a year for 24 years, both on Medicare and Social Security. You don't have to raise any taxes. You don't have to cut any benefits. People live a lot longer now than when these laws were set 40 and 30 years ago. It's time to ease them up slowly.
Yeah, the Social Security age would have to be 83 today to be on the same
actuarial
footing.
And I'm not, look, we don't want to make money on Social Security. We just want to let young people know who are working now at the age of 35 that their investment will be protected. I will do it by raising the age. I will do it by allowing tax-free savings plans for individuals where they can invest a portion of what would be in Social Security to their own benefit if they want to choose that. We can do that slowly. I have not come up with, here's the way we're going to do it. I like listening. And this campaign is a listening time for me. I believe in protecting Social Security and Medicare. I think they're critical to us. But I am open to good ideas on how to make them better. I would start with raising the eligibility age slowly over time, doing the systemic changes in costs that I've already outlined in healthcare. That really helps Social Security. Medicare. We do those two things, I think it's a big step forward. Now there are two other entitlements. I want to talk about Medicaid, which is medical assistance to people who can't afford to be sick. That needs to be block granted to the state. I would have 50 different systems. Each state would have its own system, and their block grant, a check from the federal government, from the taxpayers, would be capped, limited, and let each individual state do it best. I bet we could get savings that you never thought of. And finally, food stamps. You know, I've always supported helping people who are hungry get food. I think every American believes that. But our food stamp situation is filled with abuse, a fraud. There are people buying Hostess cupcakes with their food stamps. I mean, come on, America. Let's help people who need help. But the program ought to be run wisely and well and for the benefit of the people who are eating this food. It needs to be healthy, nutritious, and it needs to be regulated in that regard.
Governor, we have a couple minutes left here in the show. You've made New Hampshire the focus of your presidential campaign.
I have.
You seem to be moving up in the polls here.
A little bit, yes. A little bit.
What's your end game here? I mean, what's your plan? The primary is
I
3 weeks from yesterday.
want to surprise you in New Hampshire. It's been slow. Retail is different now. The debates are so important. I haven't been invited to a single debate, and someday, Rich, you and I are going to find out why. I'm the only guy running who's been a congressman and a governor, and you've heard me work on the issues. I'm prepared. That doesn't mean I know everything, but I love America, and I think it's heading in the wrong direction. It's the only reason I'm running. I don't need a day job. I'm plenty busy, but I want to leave something for my grandkids. So I've been surprised about the absence of debate. We're ahead of a few candidates now for the first time. We are beginning to move a little bit, and I would ask our audience that if you're polled this week about who you might vote for, I want you to consider saying Buddy Roemer. I know your mind's still open. 59% of the voters in New Hampshire are undecided. And even those who are decided, 51% of them say they could change their mind. This race is wide open. You don't know who the next president's going to be. I want you to look at me. I'm an old guy. I got a bad accent. I'm from far away in Louisiana, but I came to New Hampshire. I live here. I love here. I shop here. I fight here. I stand here. And I'm going to ask New Hampshire to do something that no other state will do. I'm going to ask you to send a message to Washington, D.C. Send Buddy Roemer.
Governor Roemer, thank you for joining us this morning here on Girard at Large. We appreciate your taking time in your busy schedule to be with us, to share your thoughts and views with our listeners. I understand, by the way, that you were at a local bank the other day getting your stuff notarized, and they said they heard about you on our radio show. Is that true?
They did. They paid you the greatest compliment. We qualified in Arizona, Texas, and Oklahoma, and we did it at the bank by getting them to notarize my signature. We're going to be on the ballot of 15 states so far. We're shooting for 4.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
Yes.
Well, Governor, we thank you for spending time. We hope that if your schedule allows, we'll have you back between now and the primary, which is 3 weeks from yesterday.
Yeah, so let's do it in a week or 2.
All right, we'll tie up with your schedule and we'll get you back in. Tomorrow we have our small business tip of the week, our public safety issue of the week. We're going to learn about the Ware Winter Market. And BJ Perry and Tom DeRosa join us for Primary Perspective. We'll be talking all things New Hampshire primary. No doubt this interview will be the subject of discussion. We thank you for tuning in. We are just flat out of time for the entire crew here in Girard at Large. We appreciate your listening. Be good, be well. Until tomorrow, don't do anything I wouldn't.